On today's show, Karl-Anthony Towns dominates the Nets and spoils Noah Clowney's career night at Barclays Center. I'll offer my top takeaways from the Nets' 12th straight loss to the Knicks right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, I'm going to be recapping the Nets' 113-100 loss to the Knicks on Monday at Barclays Center. And this was another game that the Nets competed early. They were up by 2 at the end of the first quarter. It looked like a much more competitive Nets showing than the last Knicks matchup at Madison Square Garden. So I said up by 2 at the end of the first. They fell behind, but they fought back to tie the game early in the third quarter. But as this one progressed deeper into the second half, it became clear the Nets weren't going to have the offense to hang with this Knicks squad, and they had zero answers for Karl-Anthony Towns, who just dominated this game. You know, this is, as I said, the 12th straight Nets loss to the Knicks. That is the longest streak on either direction in the series' history. And the Nets had won 9 straight games before this, before this 12-game stretch. The KD, Kyrie, Harden era, the Nets won 9 straight. They were the dominant team in this one. And since then, the Nets have obviously gone into the rebuild, but they have just been dominated for the most part. There's been some competitive games mixed in, but just they've been outclassed by the Knicks, in almost all of these matchups. And the Nets may not win another game in this series for a while if the matchup at center is Karl-Anthony Towns versus Nic Claxton. You look at this one, Karl-Anthony Towns had his way with the Nets, as he did in the first matchup at Madison Square Garden earlier this season. But this one was about as glaring as it's going to get. Cat had 37 points and 12 rebounds on 14 of 20 from the field in this one. You look at Nic Claxton's numbers, he had 8 points, 4 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 of 8 from the field. So the Nets had no answer for Karl-Anthony Towns. Nic Claxton had no answer for Karl-Anthony Towns. I mean, Cat is, one of the best big men in the league, obviously, one of the most versatile big men in the league. But these are the matchups. Like, Cat's going to give anybody matchup problems, but for Nic Claxton, these bigger, bruising, lumbering centers who can get downhill, they obviously are going to give him trouble. And in this one, it was just Cat getting wherever he wanted. I mean, he was hitting his threes, but also on the drives, just bullying his way into the paint. And the Nets really had no answers for it, and Clax didn't. And it's just tough because, this is, as good as Clax has been early this season, this is always going to be the question. When you face matchups like this, it raises the questions like, can you build forward with this player, Nic Claxton, as your starting center and commit to him given these matchup issues? And also, we've spoken about whether Nic Claxton was going to have a trade market. Like, that question that the Nets are going to be asking themselves, other teams that are prospective trade partners are also going to be asking that. So that brings up the question, will this limit his trade market? Because you look at what Nic has done. I mean, he's had the career best offensive season, like from the playmaking to the driving to the scoring. I've done full episodes about all that. Go check that out. That's all been, at the highest level of his career. And the defense, while it was lacking to begin the year, it has trended in the right direction over these last, 7, 8, 9 games. But then you get to these matchups, and these matchups are always going to be problems for Claxton because it's just the makeup of his body. Like, will it be better on some nights than others? Yes, I think tonight was about as bad as you're ever going to see it. I mean, this was just a complete bullying. Like, there's no other way to put it. Cat bullied Nic Claxton. He bullied this entire Nets team. And I talk about it, with prospective trade partners about whether or not this might limit Nic Claxton's market. I think it's a fair question to ask because any team that Nic Claxton's on, the rebounding, first of all, you're going to have rebounding concerns. I mean, Nic has never been a high-level defensive rebounder. All of the Nets teams that he's been a featured piece on have not been high-level defensive rebounding teams, and that's not all on Nic Claxton, but he is the center. He is the guy in the middle that, he does bear a decent amount of responsibility for that. And then you look at beyond the rebounding, just the defensive matchups with some of these bigger centers. And in the East, you look at it like talking about teams are potentially looking at trading for Nic Claxton as, is this going to be a guy that we want to commit to as our starting center moving forward? In the East, I mean, if you're an Eastern Conference team, you probably have to go through Karl-Anthony Towns in a playoff series, or there's a very good chance you're going to. So that presents obviously matchup problems as we've seen in most of these Knicks-Nets matchups. And then you look out west and you have teams like the Nuggets and the Rockets at the top of the standings with Jokic and then Şengün and plus Steven Adams on that Houston squad. And, that's going to be tough for a lot of these teams. Like, you look at that, does that mean that Nic can't be your starting center because of these matchup concerns? No, it doesn't necessarily mean it. I think that Nic can do things to hold up better, but to do that, he has to be so engaged and give such consistent effort to hold up in these matchups. It's really a lot to ask of him. And even with that, even if he's able to put forth a really physical 36-minute, just engaged, locked in, physical throughout, giving his full effort, putting his body on the line, doing all that, even with that, it's still going to put a lot of pressure on the rest of your team because you're going to have to double in the post. You're going to have to get into rotations. You're going to have to do all of these things to try to mitigate that matchup problem. And all that is saying, for Nic to warrant for a team to look at Nic and say, what he gives up on the defensive end is, or what he gives up on the rebounding, defensive rebounding, to warrant that, Nic has to continue to play at a really high offensive level, which he has for most of this season. He didn't tonight, but he has. But, with all these concerns, even with Nic playing at this offensive level, teams are still going to be questioning, do we want to roll with him, given the defensive rebounding concerns, given the concerns about some of these bigger matchups at centers. And that's assuming that the offense continues, which, it's looking good, but there's no guarantee that, Nic is going to continue to play at this high of an offensive level. So while Nic is having the best start to a season in his career, I think that this matchup against the Knicks is kind of where, it can kind of bring you crashing back down to earth of some of the struggles and some of the pitfalls of having a player like Nic Claxton as your starting center. And I think the Nets are going to be contemplating that. And also a lot of other teams that could be prospective trade partners are also going to be contemplating that. But it wasn't all on Nic Claxton in this one. We talked to Jordy Fernandez after the game, and he said that he would like to see Nic, be a little bit more aggressive in a matchup like that. He'd like to see him have some more deflections, do some other things to disrupt the Knicks. But outside of that, the Nets did hold the Knicks to 113 points in this one, and the offense was also a major problem for the Nets. And Nic struggled offensively. Everybody did, except for Noah Clowney, who had a career night, 31 points. I'm going to talk about him in the second segment, focus that whole segment on him. But as a team, the Nets shot 33 of 87 from the field. That's 38%, and 14 of 48 from three. That's 29%. And I've said, on my last episode, after the Nets hung tough with that Raptors team on Sunday night, I said that the formula for the Nets has been, Noah Clowney and Michael Porter Jr. have been playing at a really high level. Nic Claxton has been on a lot of nights. Then the Nets are also getting other contributors alongside that on, given nights, whether it be a Yegor Dioman or a Tyrese Martin. They've been getting those core contributors, mostly Claxton, the revamped front court of Claxton, Clowney, Porter Jr. And I said that while the Nets have been competing, at some point, MPJ is going to cool down, and we're going to see the MPJ shooting regression hit. And that was tonight. MPJ finished with 16 points on 6 of 15 from the field and 1 of 9 from 3, which is fine. MPJ has been playing at an elite level, frankly, an all-star level, and you were expecting a shooting night where it regresses. That was going to hit at some point, and the Nets got it in this one. But outside of Noah Clowney, Drake Powell showed some things with Nic Claxton struggling. Yegor Dioman struggled in a big way in this one. The Nets just didn't have the offense to get over the hump down the stretch, and they lose, as I said, their 12th straight game to the Knicks. 12 straight. That's pretty unbelievable. I mean, I know that since the Nets were on top and had those 9 straight wins, it's kind of completely flip-flopped of the Knicks going from the NBA's basement to contender status, and the Nets going from contender status to the NBA's basement. But still, it's just got to be tough for Nets fans at this point. I mean, you look at a game like this, and the Knicks come in and, they're dominating the Nets on most of these matchups. There are some close ones, but just 12 straight losses, Knicks fans just taking over Barclays Center as they usually do. But that wasn't always the case. People always make jokes about that. Mikal Bridges spoke about that when he got traded here and, the first Knicks matchups that he played in of Knicks fans taking over Barclays Center. But I remember I was at a lot of those games during that 9-game winning streak the Nets had over the Knicks when Kevin Durant was going bananas. Kevin Durant had 50 points during one of those games at Barclays Center towards the end of his Nets tenure. During a lot of those games, sure, there were a lot of Knicks fans, but there were a lot of Nets fans too. And it was, even if not, I would say more in the Nets' favor. We had a game during that streak where there were Brooklyn chants in Madison Square Garden during that streak. So, this notion that the Knicks are just always taking over Barclays Center, I think it's true a lot of the time. But when the Nets were at their peak during that, KD Kyrie era, there was a lot of, there was a Nets fan dominance during some of those games when the Nets were just putting it on the Knicks. And since then, it's trended completely in the other direction, which I'm sure is tough for a lot of Nets fans, but it's just the state of how it's going to be for the foreseeable future. And if we continue to have this Nic Claxton, Karl-Anthony Towns matchup, it's going to be really hard for the Nets to compete in some of these matchups. So they got 2 more this season, and we'll see how that plays out. But the main positive we can take from this loss, and there were a few, Noah Clowney, man, like continuing his ascension, continuing a third-year breakout, a major positive for a player that there were huge question marks about entering this season. So what did I see from Noah? What should fans be looking for from him moving forward? I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, nobody knows money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money, trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood's Legend Advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood Strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money too. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Guys, when I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, energy, mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using Drip Drop. It's doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. Drip Drop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. Guys, I like using Drip Drop as part of my daily routine. I'll mix a packet in the morning before the gym or during that midday slump. It actually tastes amazing. My go-to flavor is the lemon lime, and it's become my secret weapon for staying sharp and energized through long days. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNBA for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard, and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. Coming back from the break, continuing today's Locked On Nets episode, recapping Brooklyn's 113-100 loss to the New York Knicks. And I went through a lot of the negatives, but I got to hit on a positive, and that is Noah Clowney. No other bigger positive takeaway you can have from a game than Noah Clowney in this one. Career high, 31 points for Noah Clowney in this one. 9 of 17 from the field, 7 of 13 from 3, 6 of 6 from the free throw line, and finished a +1 in 39 minutes. So Noah Clowney played 39 minutes in this one, and, the Nets just got demolished in the minutes that he wasn't on the floor, but they were a +1 with him. And this is just Noah continuing an offensive, turnaround, an offensive breakout, an offensive ascension, whatever you want to call it, continuing that in a way that, frankly, I just didn't see coming. I mean, Noah, we talked about it. I wrote several pieces about it on Clutch Points entering the season during training camp about the body transformation that Noah had undergone, and that was clear. You could see it. It wasn't just like fluff, something that, we hear every year going to training camp, like so-and-so looks bigger, so-and-so looks slimmer, so-and-so looks stronger. Like Noah, it was noticeable. It was not just a fluff piece, and he has really translated that to the court. And I've talked about the improved driving ability, and I've also talked about the three-point struggles. I talked about that on my last pod, and tonight, he was really doing it in, a bunch of ways. It was really nice to see the three-point shot come around in this one, because before this, Noah was shooting around 30% from 3, albeit on high volume. But tonight, knocks down 7 of 13 threes. The Nets have maintained their confidence that Noah is going to be a high-level shooter, that he is at least an adequate shooter at the NBA level. He showed that off tonight. And aside from that, he had 2 drives and scores, and he also got to the free throw line 6 times and was 6 of 6 from the charity stripe. And you look at Noah's 10 games as a starter now, this is a pretty decent sample size now of him being a really consistent and a pretty high-level offensive contributor. Over these last 10 games as a starter, Noah's at 16.7 points, almost 17 points a game on 45, 37, 79 shooting splits. So the driving ability, a major positive. I spoke about that at length on my last pod, just his ability to get into the lane, his confidence and his ability to create space using the weight that he's added in his upper body, allowing him to, get into the lane, create space, finish, play off of 2 feet. Also, this variety of baby hooks and running hooks and shots that he's been converting on in the short mid-range. All of that's a positive. But I did say that, the 3-point shooting, it had regressed while the driving ability had, improved. The three-point shooting has regressed. And tonight, you get 7 of 13 from three, and that's really nice to see. And that really bumped Noah's percentage up during this 10 games as a starter in a big way. He's now up to 37% from three, and he's shooting 7.5 threes per game during that stretch. He's shooting 8.7 threes per 36 minutes. And the foul drawing for me is one of the biggest surprises, and also is going to be a huge feather in his cap moving forward if he can continue to do it. Because if you can get to the free throw line consistently as a driver, just know how to kind of work to those spots and get those calls, that raises your offensive floor in a huge way. So if Noah is a good three-point shooter, I think as the Nets are confident that he will be, and then you add this driving and foul drawing ability, that'll be huge for him. Because you look at during this 10-game stretch as a starter, Noah's attempting 5.2 free throws per game, 6 free throws per 36 minutes. That's huge. I mean, like, that is going to be massive for him as an offensive player if he can continue to do that. And a lot of that is because he's putting this added weight to use. Like, you see him bullying his way down the lane. You see him, some of the crafty pickups that he's working on when he drives down the lane, some of the ways that he's able to play off 2 feet, all of that. He's able to create space using his frame when he's doing those things, these different crafty moves that he just didn't have in his bag whatsoever last season. And when he's doing that, he's drawing fouls because he is a guy who's 6'9", 230 whatever pounds now. And when he gets downhill with the head of steam, a lot of these guys on defense, smaller wings or forwards, can't really hang with him or can't really stay up with the physicality that he's imposing. So that's leading him to get to the free throw line. So all of these things, if Noah, like we've seen stretches from Noah where he's been a high-level three-point shooter for extended stretches, we're now seeing extended stretches where he's being able to drive and draw fouls and all that. So you bring those two things together, and that gives you the makings of a pretty efficient offensive player. The next step for him is going to be the playmaking, reading defenses, creating for his teammates, limiting turnovers, all that. But I'm really encouraged by what Noah has shown as an offensive player during this 10-game stretch. And this is frankly about as good as you could have hoped for from Noah in terms of the offensive turnaround that we've seen this season. Because last year he was extremely reliant on the three-point shot, as he still is, but now on his drives and his two-point shots, he's finishing. He was at 41% on twos last year as a 6'9" big man. This year, he's close to 60%. So we've seen a huge turnaround in that regard, and all of that is extremely encouraging for him as an offensive player. Now, having said that, I do want to talk about his defense, because I do think that while the defense has been better in recent games, I think that he's still leaving much to be desired. I talked about that after the Raptors loss, and again in this loss. Obviously, Noah Clowney wasn't guarding Karl-Anthony Towns for most of the game, but just the overall physicality of this front court, when you have a front court of Noah Clowney and Nic Claxton, it leaves a lot to be desired. And that might be another reason where, if Noah Clowney is this third-year ascending player, and, just last thing on the offense, it must be mentioned, Noah's 21 years old. So he has so far to go in his development, and that should lend Nets fans encouragement to what some of the guys right now who are 19 years old, similar age to what Noah Clowney was, the Nets rookies right now, what are they going to look like in 2 years? We have no idea. It's just a good sign and a good reminder of development and how long it can take for some of these guys to really flash things. And Noah Clowney's 21. When he's, 24, 25, and really just getting into his prime, who knows what he'll be then when he's had this added weight to his frame, and he's been doing some of this stuff for 2-3 years with that added weight, and he's able to get more comfortable. So that's really encouraging. But the defense, you have this third-year player, Noah Clowney, who's ascending, looks like he could be a big part of your future. Can is a Noah Clowney, Nic Claxton front court really viable? I'm not going to go fully back into the Nic Claxton conversation, but that's just another thing to consider there, because you look at Noah Clowney, the defense and the rebounding, it has left much to be desired. I talked about the defense on last night's pod, and there was a number of possessions tonight, I thought again, where it just looks like Noah's out of position. It looks like he falls asleep a little bit off the ball, getting beat from the corner, getting beat on closeouts, some of those things. I want to see more from him there. Today, it wasn't as much of the low man rotations. I thought that he had some trouble guarding on the perimeter, and Noah is athletic for his size, but I don't think he's ever going to be a high level perimeter defender. So that kind of, limits, I think, what he can be defensively. And then on the low man rotations and things like that, we've seen spurts, but we haven't seen it necessarily consistently for the whole season. And if you're not really guarding on the perimeter at a high level and also on those low man rotations, you're leaving a lot to be desired there. It kind of makes it difficult offensively. And Noah isn't a bad athlete. We've seen him have some big blocks, like the one he had in Boston on Kada, but he's not I don't think he's an elite defensive athlete either in terms of his lateral quickness, in terms of, his, vertical explosiveness or being a rim protector or anything along those lines. I'm just not sure. Like, I think that Noah can be a fine defender, but the, potential for him to be like a huge plus defender, I'm not sure I see that. And then you factor also in the rebounding, which I think has been the major negative of Noah Clowney's game this season, has been the rebounding. You look at tonight, he had 4 rebounds in 39 minutes tonight. And you look at over these last 10 games since he's a starter, he's averaging 3.6 rebounds per 36 minutes. So that's obviously extremely low. He's rebounding 11.5% of his opponent's missed field goals. That ranks 38th out of 41 big men to play over 350 minutes this season. He has 1 offensive rebound in the last 10 games that he's been a starter. So all of that, it just leaves a lot to be desired. And I think that, similar to how I talked about it with Nic Claxton, when you're Noah Clowney's size and you're a little bit slighter compared to some of these other guys, you're going to have to give a lot of consistent effort, a lot of, just really playing at your maximum intensity all the time to be an effective guy on the glass. And I asked Noah about it after this game, and he said that he thinks its rebounding's been better. And he said that, they have this front court of MPJ, him and Claxton. So a lot of the time they're fighting over rebounds. And, if he sees one of them is going to have the rebound, he doesn't go for it, or he's going to let them have the rebound. He's not going to wrestle them for it, which, I guess, that's true, but I don't think that explains, 3.6 rebounds per 36 minutes. That's a guy who's nearly 6'10" and playing in the front court. And the Nets are getting bullied on the defensive glass a lot of nights. They're one of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the league. So I think that just all leaves a lot to be desired. And I'm really encouraged by Noah's offensive performance. I'm confident that he can be at least like an average defender. The rebounding is going to have to improve a lot. So these offensive flashes from Noah are great. They are still flashes. It is still only a 10-game sample size. It's really encouraging, but you're going to need to see that more consistently, and you're going to need to see the defense and the rebounding get a lot better. But overall, just taking a step back, while those are criticisms, this is a extremely high-level start regarding, relative to what expectations were for Noah Clowney. So a major positive for him overall, and another game offensively where he's showing things that, frankly, I didn't anticipate, and I think a lot of other people didn't anticipate. But he wasn't the only positive during this next game. Last guy I want to hit on is Drake Powell, who played extended minutes in this one and continued to impress with some offensive things that I think a lot of Nets fans had questions about what he'd be able to do in some of these areas entering the season. So I'll get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Basketball season is officially here, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in, the app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NBA tickets, fast, easy, and stress-free. Guys, you can use Game Time to grab seats for any NBA games, and it couldn't be simpler. You'll have great seats in minutes. What you see is what you pay. No hidden fees at checkouts, and their zone deals are a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKDOWNNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Brooklyn's loss to the Knicks on Monday at Barclays Center. And last guy that I want to hit on is Drake Powell, who had another really encouraging performance in this one, especially on the offensive end of the floor. You look at what Drake Powell did. He had 15 points, 4 assists, 1 turnover, 5 of 10 shooting from the field, 2 of 6 from 3, and Drake played 24 minutes in this one. So extended run for Drake. He did some good things offensively, and I thought that what I liked about this one is Drake started off, pretty cold and pretty rough offensively. He missed his first 3 shots. He had either 2 points or was scoreless in the first half, and then he came out in the second half, and he kind of reached into his bag a little bit. The game was getting away from the Nets a little bit. As I said, they didn't really have anything going offensively. It's outside of Noah Clowney. MPJ was struggling. Igor Joman was struggling. Tyrese Martin was struggling relative to some of the other nights that he's had. And Drake Powell, he did turn in a stretch that didn't really get the Nets all the way back in the game, but it did bring it from 17 to 10 or 11. So it got the Nets at least respectably close. And you look at it Drake just continues to impress me in terms of the on-ball juice and the self-creation that he's showing, because the Nets are playing with the ball in Drake's hands a lot during his minutes. And I've said it, I've given out the stat that Drake was a guy who posted a 13% usage rate last year in North Carolina. That was the lowest of any wing to ever be drafted. So that was a major red flag. And there were major concerns about how Drake Powell was going to be able to hold up in a half-court offense in the NBA because he was a very high-level transition play finisher, cutter, some of those things. But in terms of an evolving NBA that's deeper than it ever has been before, offensively and defensively, you need to be able to be a decision maker. You need to be able to do some things off the bounce outside of just being a spot-up three-point shooter. And that was, those were the questions surrounding Drake because of what he, or what he didn't do at North Carolina, or the role that North Carolina put him in. And that's a reason that a lot of draft analysts had him, late 20s into the 30s on their draft boards. And a lot of people consider the Nets taking him at 22 a reach. But the Nets saw the defensive potential. They saw the measurables. They saw the athleticism, all that. And they clearly had some confidence that Drake was going to be able to round out those, less polished aspects of his offensive game, or just they had confidence that he wasn't able to show some of those things in the role that he played at North Carolina last season. That's what Drake has said about it. And also, Drake was a five-star recruit. He was a guy at this time last year that a lot of people thought had the potential to be a lottery pick. And then he plays this very limited role in North Carolina. And not all that was just because, North Carolina made a mistake. I think Drake did have offensive limitations to his game, but you did see when he was this five-star recruit in college that he, did some things on the ball offensively, obviously. And there are always going to be questions about how much that's going to translate to the NBA, because when you're a player like Drake, who's 6'5", 7 foot wingspan with a 43-inch vertical at the high school level, you're going to overpower a lot of guys on almost every night. So there were questions about how that would translate to the NBA, especially given how limited he was at North Carolina. But Drake's shown some on-ball creation chops. You've seen it in multiple games, throughout his, this however many games he's played, 10 games he's played now, since coming back from that ankle injury. You're seeing plays where he's hitting sidestep threes off the bounce. You're seeing plays where he's getting into the mid-range and he's hitting mini step backs or turnarounds. You're seeing plays where he gets to the rim and finishes using his athleticism and his ball handling ability. So all of that is extremely encouraging for me for a player who I think, there were major concerns about, as I've said, and a player who has the kind of defensive potential that Drake has. To see him be able to do some of this stuff this early in his NBA career, when doesn't exactly have an all-star supporting cast or these all-star elite on-ball creators alongside him that are going to open things up for him, I think it's all a major positive. And I'm really encouraged by what Drake Powell has done in these recent games, and also him playing 24 minutes in this game. That was really nice to see. And I think a big reason for that was also a player that he has been competing for minutes for off the bench. It's been him and Zaire Williams jockeying for those wing minutes in the second unit. And last thing I want to close it out on, Zaire Williams is a DNP CD in this game. He was removed from the rotation by Jordi Fernandez, and we know that Zaire has had some really rough stretches in these recent games. He was 1 of 8 from the field, 1 of 4 from 3 in his last 2 games combined. The defense has been pretty bad. The turnovers have been pretty bad. He's shooting 30% from 3 for the season. And we asked Jordi Fernandez after the game, and he said it was his decision. He made the call to remove Zaire Williams from the rotation. He put Jalen Wilson in the rotation, and Jalen played 22 minutes in this one. So it's the most extended run that Jalen's gotten in a while. So all of those Zaire Williams minutes went to Jalen Wilson. And Jordi Fernandez's reasoning is he said that he hasn't seen the defensive impact. He said that last year that he felt that Zaire was elite in a lot of the defensive metrics that they're looking for. I think describing Zaire Williams' defense as elite, I think, is a little generous, I would say, but it was, good in stretches last season. And then he said this year that the defensive impact just hasn't been there. And he doesn't feel like Zaire has done enough on that end, and he's sending him a challenge. So I fully expect Zaire to be back in the rotation, but I think that this was a message from Jordi Fernandez that he needs to see more from him in that area. We'll see how long he keeps him out of the rotation, but I would expect him to come in, because I do think that despite Zaire's struggles, he should be getting minutes over a guy like Jalen Wilson, in my opinion, who hasn't really shown anything this season. So I expect Zaire to get back into the rotation, but when he does, it should be at least an even split between him and Drake Powell, if not in Drake's favor, because I think Drake is showing a lot of encouraging things. And as much of a feel-good story as Zaire was last season, I'm not sure that he's a guy, given his limitations as a three-point shooter, as an on-ball creator, and as a defender, that he's really a guy who's going to be like a fixture in the Nets, future plans moving forward. So that's all I got for you guys tonight. Hope you guys enjoyed the episode. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you have a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review, Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. But then it's got a few days off. They're going to be back in action at Barclays Center on Friday. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.